Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Anxious Love Coach podcast. My name's Natalie. I'm your host. I'm excited to be here with my co coach, Sheridan Ruth. Many of you guys have met her before, either on the podcast or on Instagram, or maybe you're even in our group program, Both Feet In, and you are seeing both of us. Welcome back. Hi, Sheridan.
To be introduced. Hello.
Yeah. Hi. I'm so excited about this episode today because this is actually more for womb bearers, for women. This is all about relationship anxiety centered around the menstrual cycle and how you might feel a different way towards your partner depending on the phase of your cycle that you are in. So we think that this is going to be really useful for you if you are a woman in partnership, or if you are a man or someone outside of the gender binary, if you have periods or you know someone that experiences periods, and you notice that you might feel different towards your partner and towards yourself throughout different stages of your cycle. We are going to go through each of the four phases, what they are representative of. You know, the menstrual cycle is so beautiful in that there's metaphors just drizzled inside the whole cycle. So we're going to be going through each of these four phases and explaining why it's important to understand what you're uniquely wired for at each phase in the cycle, so that you can really take advantage of the unique strengths available in each phase to maximize your level of connection with both yourself and your partner. So I'm so glad to have Sheridan on here. We're both really passionate about this topic. We're so passionate about it that, in fact, we have actually centered our 6-month women's group program around it. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But in either case, hi.
I'm going to add something. If you guys are still listening and you do not have a womb and you do not experience menstruation, and maybe you don't even experience relationship anxiety, keep listening, because it is so helpful when you have a partner who does menstruate or does experience relationship anxiety to be able to understand what they're going through and why it feels like there are 5 different people in the space of 4 weeks.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like how there's like 5 different people with 4 phases. It could be
I don't know
8
where the
people,
fifth came
10
from.
people.
It's because in the menstruation, you're like 6 people, let's be honest.
More or less.
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll get to that.
And we'll get there. So if you look at, and we're not hormonal experts here, so we'll just lay down that discernment. What's the word I'm looking for? Disclaimer. Thank you. Disclaimer that we are not hormonal experts. We're primarily speaking from personal experience. And also, I would say that the perspective that we're looking at this from is more of a holistic spiritual one. However, you will notice that if you look at a chart of hormones, that it has a very cyclical type of nature. And you'll also notice that the moon has 4 phases and is also 28 days. So there is a lot of spiritual symbolism here. And if you tend to kind of identify as spiritual, I think you're going to love this. And if you don't identify as spiritual, then you can kind of look at this from a more scientific lens as well. A lot of what we're covering today, personally, my first experience hearing about the 4 phases and how you might feel different and crave different things, from Elisa Vitti, who is, she wrote a book called, she has In the Flow and Woman Code. Yeah, that was the first time I heard about cycle syncing and, evidence-based practices that have to do with what phase you are in your cycle and what you are primed for. I loved it. And ever since reading that book, Woman Code by Elisa Vitti, who would be really cool to have on this podcast now that I think about it, more and more of what I've learned has informed this understanding of the 4 phases. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned about it first actually through yoga. I was practicing with yoga with Cassandra, if anyone sees her on YouTube. I did my yin training under her. She's amazing. And we did like lunar yoga in how to support yourself, because your body changes, your mind changes, you have all of these different needs at different times. And the first one that I learned about, which was, it made me feel very alive, and it made me feel like I love being a woman. Being a woman is so beautiful, and I feel so like, was the follicular phase.
Yes. It's one of my favorite phases too. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Totally get it. I also, back in my yoga teacher days, it was like 7 years of teaching yoga, we
yeah.
also talked about the different phases. And it's worth mentioning for those of you that, maybe we have some men listening here today. It's worth mentioning that the the feminine nature has kind of gotten really, really suppressed in society. And it shows up as some really exhausted women trying to live in a linear way when we are cyclical beings. We have to show up every day to work from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Doesn't matter if you're on your period, doesn't matter if you're having cramps. If you just gave birth, you only have a few weeks to be with your baby. The society that we live in really does not take into account um, the unique fluctuations that happen in a woman's body. And this is really kind of society's denial of the feminine. And it shows up in how we treat women. It shows up in how men and women tend to fear other women and their emotions, which emotions can kind of be, you could argue that emotions are the more yin or the more feminine piece, whereas kind of more intellectual consciousness is kind of a more yang or masculine linear way, right? So if you get tripped up on the words masculine, feminine, because you associate with certain gender identities, just use a different word, because the words masculine, feminine don't actually capture the essence of what these energies are. They really more point to them. One of them is much more linear and logical, and one of them is a lot more chaotic and flowery and full of richness and dimension and color. So we use the words masculine and feminine to point to these patterns so that we can talk about it. But don't get tripped up on the words masculine and feminine. They really just point to the energy. They don't capture like the essence of what a man is or the essence of what a woman is. That's not it at all. Within each of us, we all have masculine and feminine energies. And as I was saying, there's this collective masking of the feminine. It shows up in how we treat women, but it also shows up in how we treat the feminine energies within people, within men included. Men are really discouraged from having emotions, let alone sharing them or allowing themselves to be witnessed in them. And I see this even with my clients, my clients who are women in relationships with men. They're like, I want a man who's vulnerable. But as soon as he gets vulnerable, she freaks out, she criticizes, she uses it as a way to attack, because we are all collectively terrified a little bit of the feminine. So to own the cyclical nature is a good step, is a good place to start, to understanding your cycle and what you are geared towards, what your needs are, and so forth. Um, does that, am I on the right track here?
I think that it also gives you permission to be like, it's like taking that radical kind of like self-acceptance and self-compassion to just like when you start understanding, oh, okay, I'm not going to have the same skill set, strengths, or desires or feeling in my body and thoughts on at this time of the month than I am at a couple of weeks later. And that's totally okay. It doesn't mean that like there's something wrong. If we think about like when you said going back to 9 to 5, I feel like a lot of us, unless you're consciously working with this inside of your work, you're expected to show up at work and kind of like use the same skill set and have the same results pretty much every single day.
Yeah.
And it's not going to work. If you're a woman, you're going to have different skills or like a different, different strengths at one part of the month than you are at another part of the month. It's just, you're going to feel it. It's going to happen. So if we can begin to like bring in some understanding and like acceptance for that just being true and perfectly fine and okay, then it becomes okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not just okay, but necessary and extremely useful.
And
If you think of,
empowering.
and empowering, and if we were to bring these cycles into the workforce, I noticed that the businesses that are doing really, really well have taken on a more feminine model, in the sense that it's not just this limitless forever day in day out same result, that there's an infiniteness to that is very exhausting. The feminine nature says there's beginnings and there's middles and there's endings, and beginnings and middles and endings, and beginnings and middles and endings, and times to work hard and times to rest. It's not just work hard and that's all there is. there's there's a time for working and a time for resting, and that actually allows you to be much more selective with how you choose to spend your time and energy. And when you do that, you have much more powerful, deliberate results as opposed to just blindly efforting all the time, you know?
Yeah. And when you're saying beginnings, middles, and endings, you're reminding me, and I felt this to be really true. When I started embracing my own body's beginning, middle, and ending, and understanding it, and like just seeing the cycles, and even living my life being aware of the new moon and the full moon, and just seeing the different cycles in life, it became a lot easier to see the different cycles in my relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
instead of judging them or trying to make them mean something or trying to make it something that it wasn't, like bargain myself or fix something like, oh, but I want it to be this way and it isn't. And I want it to be this way and it isn't. And I would try and like nitpick or criticize myself to something else.
Right.
When we can like understand and embrace the cycles on a micro level, then we get to zoom out and embrace them and understand them on a macro level inside of the relationship, both ours and our partners. Because even if you're with a partner that, let's say they're a man, they don't menstruate, their hormones are going to be much more linear throughout the month. They're still going to experience cycles because they are influenced by society, they are influenced by their work, they're influenced by the moon, they're influenced by all of these other external things, and they're still going to be living a natural cycle all the time. And these cycles are going to like layer on top of each other. You'll have like your body cycle, then like a work cycle, and then like a program cycle, and then like a training. And there's like all of these things just like layering on top of each other. And we can begin to see the cycles and the pattern and just trust that, oh, okay, this is an ending right now. And it
Yeah.
feels like this. And I know that there will be a beginning soon and it will feel differently.
Totally. Yeah, and also, I mean, just think about the seasons. The seasons are like have their own menstrual cycle. Right now, we're in spring, so things are beginning. We're in the follicular phase of the earth, and that is going to feel different to us all, regardless of whether you're male or female. You're going to feel the newness of the season. It's just some people are more attuned, and some people are not. Women tend to feel more connected to Mother Nature, the cyclical nature of things, because we are cyclical beings. Like attracts like. So we will understand the cycles of the earth more than, men who are kind of more linear, and they're not going to see how that affects everything. But I really do believe if you're a man listening and you're just curious about this, understanding the layers and the cycle of the feminine is going to help you understand her so much more beautifully, and not just understand but have reverence for, because there's so many gifts embedded in your woman or the woman in your life cycles. And just imagine what it's kind of like if you are aware of, I'm just going to use this analogy. If you are aware of if you're a farmer, your job is to plant seeds, okay, into the earth. Take that analogy as you will, whether you're planting seeds into the earth or into your woman, you better know what season you're in. If you try to plant blueberries and blueberry says, I like to have my seeds planted in summer, and you try to plant it in winter, she's going to be like, haha, joke's on you. You just wasted your time. Right. So as a man, as someone who likes to plant seeds or ideas, be mindful of what phase the earth or the woman is in. And that's why I think it can be so beautiful to, women, we have these cycle tracking apps. I use Life. It's my favorite. I pay for it. But I think as a man, it's a great idea to also get this app and track your woman's cycles, because you can kind of anticipate her a little bit better. And you can gift her with things that are uniquely like attuned. Women are freaking so turned on by an attuned man. So if you're like, oh, she's ovulating, this is the kind of gift she would want right now. Or, oh, she's menstruating, this is the kind of gift she would want right now. She's going to be like, oh my God, you know me. which is what we all want. We just want to be known.
There's the app I have is Clue, and you can like invite a partner or someone onto it as well. And they turn on the notification, and it comes up a couple of days before my period, and it says PMS is coming up. And like sometimes my partner Andres, he's not on these things, and I have felt really upset about that at times. And I think he attunes to it in his own way. So if your partner's like, I don't want to download an app, that's cool too. Don't worry about it.
Don't
But
worry, you don't need an app to know that your woman's feeling cranky. She will let you know, app or not.
When I started just like screenshotting the little PMS is coming up and just sending it to him, it's like, this is your warning sign. This is happening. Bring chocolate home.
You are the app. No, this is actually, Madeline Moon would say that's a very artistic way of getting your message across. It's like, it's playful. You are sending him art, a screenshot. You know, here's this gift. Yeah, a little heart.
Just my gift for you
out there.
But in that sense, like if we really think about it, tuning and understanding your cycle is a gift to you, and it's a gift to the people in your life, right?
Yeah.
There is going to be certain activities that you're going to want to engage in at certain times, and trying to engage, for example, trying to host a really big party right before your period, I would say maybe don't do that. And it would actually be a gift to you and all the other people involved if you were to say, why don't we wait a couple of days?
Yep. I literally didn't book a concert that I wanted to go to because I see 2 months out, I'm starting my period that day. And I was like, darn it, I wish they had it on some other day. And the reason I didn't do that is because literally 2 weeks ago, I went to a concert on day one, which is the period starting. And I was like, oh no. And I had to pump pills all day just to numb myself enough to go. And because I showed up all numb, I had a great time, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I know I could have if I were fully feeling. But I ended up drinking a bunch that night because why not? And so a bunch of ibuprofen, a bunch of alcohol. Next morning, I was a train wreck. Was it worth it? Yeah, but it could have been better had I maybe chosen another day or maybe even skipped it. Who knows? And there is a level of discernment. You can't like do this wrong, but I think when you are primed to understand what's going on with your body and your hormones and also your mind will think differently at different phases of your cycle. You won't be so hard on yourself when you don't match up to what you think you're supposed to be feeling and doing.
Yeah. And you won't make impulses, you won't engage in impulses or decisions that maybe you're coming from a certain place, when you can kind of step back, witness, and be like, oh yes, it makes sense for me to be thinking that way because I am menstruating, I'm about to menstruate, or I'm ovulating.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. That doesn't mean that it's true.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. I always say, don't make any big decisions, during some of these times. Cool. So let's start right in the follicular phase. We both, this is some of our favorite time. Do you want to talk about what's happening in the follicular phase?
Yeah. So I think of the follicular phase, like as Nat said, it's spring, right? And it's kind of like you're kind of like because it's the period of time. It usually lasts about a week right after your period. So right after you finish bleeding, sometimes you even feel it. I've noticed, especially if I really rest on my period, my follicular phase, I'll feel the energy while I'm still bleeding, just kind of those last like 1 or 2 days. But it's this sudden emergence of energy, like you're coming out, right? Like it's like, oh, here I am. And most of the time you'll find a bit of a like a heightened sense of wanting to plan things or concentrate or get things done or be productive. You're kind of like focusing on getting out into the world. Like here I am blossoming like a spring chicken and focusing on action, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you feel like this energy to like, I don't know, maybe you want to go to the gym. Like you're feeling motivated, you're feeling enthusiastic, you have drive and you have confidence and you feel, yeah, just like let's get this done.
Yeah.
What I have noticed as well is like that's really the focus. And there are probably, and maybe you have some things to add now, but there are other things that I've noticed that I'm not great at during this time. And I can save them for other periods of time.
Yes. Yeah. And it's worth mentioning too that there are underlying commonalities between each of these phases. So, for me, there's a slightly different metaphor than Sheridan's, but they all share the same sort of quality of newness and new beginnings.
Mm.
For me, I see the follicular phase as like I'm just starting to tap on the accelerator just a little bit. It's like time. I'm not at full speed yet, but I just came, I just turned my car on after it's been off for a few days, and I'm just starting to speed up, and there's a sense of possibility in the air. I was taking a walk and I posted on Instagram the other day, something my mom trained me to look for. It's just a little detail about nature that you can notice about spring. It's very, very subtle. There's certain trees in springtime that if you look at them, you'll notice the very tips of the branches, like the teeny tiny capillaries of branches, they will start swelling and bloating. And it's not a bud, it's not a flower bud, it's not even a leaf bud. It's just the bark, the ends of the bark at the tiny, tiny little fingertips of the branches start to bloat. And it's like that is the follicular phase right there. It's
Yeah.
like I haven't blossomed yet, but the energy is moving through the end of, my cycle. And it's very subtle. And the follicular phase is often about that subtle newness. And it's like you're carrying a big secret that you haven't released out to the world. It has that like, I have something that is going to move through me this month. And it's my favorite time. It's so exciting. It's so fresh. And just know that your experience as a listener of the follicular phase might be different. But in general, there is a sense of newness and freshness. I noticed some of the things that I'm really good at during my follicular phase are, like Sheridan said, planning, because chances are in the something might have been born out of the emptiness that is the menstrual phase right before then. So I am primed for clear thinking, planning, envisioning, setting intentions. You can do that during your menstrual phase too, but we are primed to start new projects, envision things. Our intuition is really heightened, or has been heightened during menstruation. Is now we're just starting to like take action on those things. So it really is about kind of what do you want to create this time around? That is the question. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think, and this kind of moves us into like, so something that Natalie and I have wanted to touch on is what symptoms or what are things that you might experience in relationship to relationship anxiety, like a flavor that you might experience around that. And the only thing, and this is leading to it, is that because of this energy that's moving towards planning and action and really that thinking and moving and doing mind, notice that we're moving away from emotions, right? This is a little bit less of the tell me how you feel. How does that,
Yeah.
right? It's a little bit less of that.
More intellect.
Yeah, it's more intellect. And so I've noticed that, and we spoke about this before, sometimes your partner will express emotions, and sometimes you might be like, oh, why are you being so vulnerable? Why are you expressing emotions? What? I've noticed that in this time period, because I'm like, all right, guys, what are we doing for the next 2 weeks? Let's get things done. If my partner is like having an emotional experience, in my mind, I might like push that back straight away. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, dude, we did that 5 days ago. What?
You missed your chance.
Move forward. Yeah,
We've
like move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is so
Yeah.
ironic because we usually stereotypically see it as being the other way around, where the woman is all emotional and he's the one being like, dude, it's fine. But Actually, in the follicular phase, we are a lot more intellectual and more primed for like it's actually the follicular phase in a weird way. It's very penetrative. It's like
It is.
I'm coming out of the shadows. I'm coming out of the closet. It's a very forward moving energy, which by its very nature is rather masculine if you think about it, or yang or whatever you want. It's that penetrative forward moving dick energy. Like it's forward moving. So if your partner's all up in their feels, you're gonna be like, huh? Uh yeah,
What are we going to do about that?
yeah, what are we gonna do about that? Get it together.
Yeah, yeah, and then like that can obviously like lead to like, oh, what does this mean about us as
Right.
a thing, and like, what does this mean about how I'm relating to him, and if I can't be in his feel, we can go there, or we can say, hey, I'm in my follicular phase.
Don't hold that over their head over all the time, obviously. we can be
Yeah,
we can be in our follicular phase and hold space for people's emotions. It's possible.
it's so possible. We do it.
Yes.
Well, Natalie and I do it once a month, once a
Yeah.
week,
It,
every month.
yeah. Yes, it's true. It's true. And the reason we share this is to point out that you might have a pattern, and all we want to do is just notice what you are primed for. Okay, but that doesn't mean you have to stick to that. So it's just take advantage of the follicular phase if you are wanting to start new projects. Like if you are wanting in your relationship to try something new, this is the time to do it. If you want to go skydiving together, you want to try a new restaurant, you want to start a new hobby, or you want to try a new position or in the bedroom, or you want to just start doing some kinky stuff that you've never done before, follicular phase is the time. You're going to naturally be primed to play with some new ideas. And if you notice yourself feeling anxious because you've fallen into a routine and some part of you desires something new and you're feeling anxious and guilty about that, you might be in your follicular phase and you're just naturally primed for wanting new things. And there is a brilliance and a wisdom in that. See if you can honor it. And it doesn't have to be this like grand big thing. You don't have to, you know, make a huge purchase of something that you've never made. It could just literally be maybe when you take walks together through the park, you're always on their right side. And today you try being on their left side, right? These little things it just switches your brain a little bit and try something different. Or try making sounds that you've never made before, try doing movements that you've never made before. It's really just about accessing new sides of yourself and embracing new possibilities.
It's really natural to feel anxiety at this period, just anxiety in general. And we know that sometimes that can fixate on your partner. Because because we have this innate urge to move into action, there are going to be times in your life for certain lifestyles where that isn't nourished and it isn't supportive. And maybe you don't feel like you have the opportunity to plan and to organize. Maybe you feel like there's something that you like, maybe logistically you just can't do that. Maybe it feels like you're kind of stuck in a way. Maybe you have a desire and it feels like you can't have that met. So having grace with yourself and like finding, I really believe in, like, I believe that you can make big changes. So there's going to be a time where you're going to say, you know what, I'm feeling just completely unfulfilled in my job and I'm projecting it onto my partner and I'm saying he's the problem. I need to just get a different job.
Yeah.
And there are also going to be times where it's like, maybe while you're making breakfast, you put on, I did this the other day. I don't listen to tango. And now you sent me a tango playlist.
Oblivion.
And it was like,
Astor Piazzolla. Mm. Mm. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. But, yeah. And so it was just on my like history when I put my Spotify on in the morning and I started like making my tea in the morning and it was like, and I was like, oh, this is so like vibrant and fun. And it can be just those little changes that can just bring a little bit more spice and give you an outlet for your urges and your impulse that you're naturally going to have at this time of month.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So enjoy it, and give yourself a lot of grace if you don't have the opportunities that you want. there was something else I was going to say, but it has flown away. So I guess that's it. I guess we can move into the next phase.
Ovulation.
Ovulation. I also love this phase. How long?
I'm ovulating.
I should have researched. This phase is not very long, eh? It's like
No, it
less than a
lasts
week,
5 days.
5 days.
Yeah, ovulation lasts 5 days, and it's probably the one that I think that you're going to feel apart from menstruation in your body a little bit more, because like on a physical level you might notice like discharge, or like you feel really good in your body, like we feel really feminine, right?
Saucy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sassy. But maybe you can explain what it means to you.
Yeah. Well, some women actually do feel the pop of the egg getting
I
kind
feel
of.
that.
Do you? I forget what it's called. It's like Messerschmitt or something. There's some.
Yeah, it's Mercer something syndrome, and it can be quite painful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So if that's you, you're not doing something terribly wrong. A lot of women experience it. But yes, this is the time when the egg is kind of released and is like, "Hi, I am ready to be fertilized," and your body is primed to make babies. Like that is the job of ovulation, is to get pregnant. So your body is going to be primed to have sex, which means you're going to be primed for connection, both physically and emotionally. And this is a time to really focus on relationships. Yes, with yourself, but it's more external. There's more of a blossoming outward. If we look at the seasons, this is summertime. If you look out, if even if you it's summer in wherever you live, unless it's like Australia, I guess, where it gets cold there. But I think the whole point of summer is to blossom open. You'll notice that the flowers are wide open, and the my brain is saying correct that thing with Australia, Natalie. Summer is in December for you guys.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they're actually in autumn at the moment, which
Oh,
is the next
really?
phase that we'll get to. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to, my brain was like, please correct that. Don't just like glaze over your stupidity. Okay, so now that I've shared that, summer, if you'll notice, all the flowers are open, all the little stamens and the flowers are like, hi, come fuck me. And that's when the bees come and the moths. I saw a moth the size of a hummingbird the other day, and it was acting like a hummingbird. I thought it was a hummingbird. And then I zoomed in and I was like, that is a moth that is the size of my thumb. That is terrifying. And it was pollinating a bunch of flowers. I was like, I
Beautiful.
didn't know moths pollinated flowers. Did you?
Yeah,
That
well,
makes
I think that, are you sure that it was a moth, or it wasn't just like a different type of butterfly? Because
it
the moth has a different body.
it was fat. It was a fat bug with.
Maybe someone's listening who knows more about bugs than
I
us
have
can
a
tell
video
us.
about it. I have a video of it. I'm going to post it on Instagram with this podcast, and someone can
Yeah,
tell me what the F
yeah.
that was. Because it actually, when I started zooming up on it on my phone, it like flapped and like almost hit me, and I screamed. So, yeah. Anyway, so this is a time of year. This is a season. Summer is a season where things get pollinated. There's a lot of babies like running around in nature. This is when animals are having sex for the most part, right? And this is when, because this is when it's safest and warmest.
Mm.
So, the animals are not having a whole ton of sex during times when they know they're going to their babies are going to freeze to death. So this is naturally a time where there's a lot of connection, whether it's sexual or emotional or physical or touch. You might notice that you're a lot more sensual during this time. Your your body as a woman is going to be releasing a lot more fluid than maybe usual. There's a delicious book I read called Taking Charge of Your Fertility. There was a time when I was really interested in natural birth control. I'm not talking about the rhythm method. That's something totally different. You actually have to measure, it's extremely diligent. You have to check your cervical position every morning. You have to check your basal metabolic temperature. You have to check the level of fluid. Like it's really intense, and you have to track it. This is big, complicated chart. But based on these things, you can calculate when you ovulate without um, you know, without necessarily using pills to regulate your if you're trying not to get pregnant. So you'll notice that the cervix actually um, drops a bit. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, I think the cervix drops a little bit. Some fluid gets released, and it's a lot more clear, a lot more slippery, because that is where sperm would travel through, right? So when it's all cloudy, it's like the sperm gets blocked more. When it's all clear and slippery, it's like full steam ahead, woohoo, right? So you'll notice you'll be more slippery during this time. There could be more discharge. And this is a time for connection. So I know in Elisa Vitti's book, Woman Code, she said that this is the time to ask your boss for a raise. This is the time to communicate a pitch and do more sales. This is a time to communicate your desires to your partner more effectively. You're going to be primed for communication, getting your point across, sharing. You might feel more generous during this time. You'll want to give more, and you'll also be more open to receiving. That channel of giving and receiving is way more open. And this may be a time, this is not guaranteed, where you want to connect with your partner more. You might want to, again, it doesn't mean for sure. There's obviously other circumstances, but if we just take this one isolated factor, this one isolated variable of the time of the month, ovulation is when you are going to feel more sexual.
Which I think can heighten so many things.
Yes.
If we're feeling really sexual and like, oh, I want to go out and go for dinner and then go dancing and then have crazy sex. The other parts of our like mind, right, are going to come in, and if we don't feel totally comfortable with that, you might find yourself like anxious because you're judging how you feel and you don't feel safe about that. And then there's like, if your partner isn't home and that's how you're feeling, well, then you're like, well, look, I'm feeling this way and my partner isn't home and I still have all of this energy that I want to put into interaction with another person, and the person that I want maybe isn't here. Then like think of it, I always think of it as like, is energy going outwards or is energy going inwards? And when we're in the follicular and the ovulation, our energy is coming outwards, and we want someone or something to receive that. Whether that means we have sex, and we are the receiver in that sense, if you're a woman, or you have a vagina, we need to go into that. So if it's also a really great time to connect with other women and just be in like, because it's really like the heightened time of like, I think that it's the time when you can kind of look at yourself in the mirror like, I feel like a woman today.
Yeah.
Like, this is what feeling like a woman is.
Yeah.
So you can bask in that with other women, which can be really beautiful. And naturally it can bring up a lot of like because it's, especially over those 5 days, I think that your behavior and your energy can kind of shift a lot if we're putting a lot of shoulds on it, on what our relationship or what our lifestyle is meant to be or what we're supposed to be thinking. Then it's going to be a contraction of the energy, right? Because we're not letting it flow. And when we're contracting it and giving like it boundaries and what we should be doing, we're naturally going to feel anxious or uncomfortable or just gross.
I understand this so much. And I think it can also go in the reverse where you're not feeling sexual, but you feel like you should be. I definitely know that's been the case for me. I just realized there's a garbage truck.
I can't hear it.
Give it a second. Okay. I've definitely been in that case where when I first started reading about these things, I was like, yeah, I want to feel more sexual, but I don't. Of course there are, ace individuals, people who are asexual, and we want to respect and honor that. And there are people who are are not feeling any level of sexual desire, but could be if they, kind of tapped into their own sexuality. A lot of times it's not just like I'm naturally asexual. Sometimes it is. And sometimes it's also, I haven't put any effort into getting to know my turn on. There could also be layers of sexual shame. If you have religious trauma around sexuality, that's going to show up as lack of desire often. For me, before I knew how to speak my boundaries and needs and desires to my partner, which is it's an ongoing thing that we're learning, there was a lot of resentment because I didn't speak my needs, and so they weren't met. And then I started resenting my partner and not wanting to have sex with them. And it takes two to tango. On the one hand, yes, frustratingly, he's not meeting my needs, but I'm also not communicating them, or I'm communicating them in a way that makes it very unlikely he's going to want to meet it. If I'm being really critical about how he hasn't met my needs, guess what? That doesn't inspire anybody to be like, oh, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I would love to meet that need for you. Like if I'm like, you suck. Why did you do this? That's not the most inspiring request. So we had to unpack a lot of resentments before I started feeling more connected and wanting that. And there are ways, like right now we're planning our wedding, and Preston promised to do an Argentine tango with me for our wedding dance, which is so cute. So now we're taking like private lessons, and I'm noticing it's this new thing, and it's really exciting, and it's translating into the bedroom, which is really exciting. So the ovulation phase, the follicular phase should kind of inform the ovulation. The ovulation is an extension of what you started planting seeds for in the follicular phase. So if you look at the moon, there's a new moon, which is all about darkness and you can't see the moon. The ovulation of the moon, the moon is not ovulating, but you guys get my drift. There's like, the full moon is like very bright and coming to fullness, like full brightness. The flowers are fully in blossom. It's like they hit the peak where they are most fertile. And so you can kind of time your whatever projects you wanted to start, whatever intentions you set in your relationship, the new thing that you wanted to try. It's really about carrying it to its fullness, carrying it fully to fruition, and following through on what you said you were going to do so that you get to the end result of that thing.
If you set an intention, maybe while you're menstruating or while you're in your follicular phase, and maybe it's not going as you had anticipated at this point, it is natural and normal to feel that burst of energy and kind of just naturally be like, wait a second, I feel disappointed, I feel sad, I feel frustrated, because this is actually not where I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
I was expecting something else. I wanted something else, and I'm not having it, and that's not nice. And my body knows, my body can feel that this is kind of the peak where things should be, like ideally things would be peaking right now. So if they're not peaking, it can lead to like a bit of a, oh, that kind of sucks.
Yeah, and you might feel anxious because the life has thrown a curveball into your plans, and it brings up our fears of a lack of control, and things get more vulnerable, which leads perfectly into the luteal phase.
Yeah. So the luteal phase we spoke about a little bit on Instagram, and everyone was like, ah!
Yeah. Oh, goddamn the luteal phase. Oh my God.
The luteal phase is really beautiful. I really like it, but I think that it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I can say, oh, I love the luteal phase, because it goes in such contrast to what society, like as Natalie was saying before, has told us about the way that we should be showing up, right? The luteal phase is that time where you find yourself like kind of go, we can call it like fall. It's kind of like you're moving towards the finishing of something. Like you're feeling like you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to start like hibernating at the moment. I'm going to start like coming back to me. Like the energy is coming like back to you. Can we bring it back in? Maybe you feel more introverted. Maybe you want to spend a little bit more time at home doing nothing with less people. The luteal phase is also about, and this is where I think it gets really heightened with relationship anxiety, is like you're beginning to analyze, what am I not bringing in to next phase? What
Mm-hmm.
am I letting go of? So we've got to this point of like the fullness. Okay, did something go how I wanted to plan? Were we blossoming? Maybe we weren't blossoming. And then naturally you're going to start like looking into your inner world and your outer world and be like, yeah, how can we make that better for next time? And you're going to start like coming inwards and be like, well, let's do some thinking around how we can make this better for next time, next
Yes.
cycle.
Yeah.
And so you can be really critical.
Yes. Well, and it's all about, because it's the fall of the cycle, this is about harvest. So you have all these
Mm,
fruits blossoming um, in ovulation. And ideally, in fall, you're harvesting the fruits of your labor. So you might be receiving all the benefits of all the intentions and follow throughs that you set in the follicular and ovulatory phases. And so it's also a time when you're naturally going to be primed to reflect on how
yeah.
things went. And so you're either going to be really proud of yourself or you're going to be pissed. Okay. And the luteal phase is actually as a direct result of what we have observed happening over the last 2 weeks is a much more emotional phase because the emotions are going to tell you, whether your needs were met or not met. And we don't want to carry our emotions into the next cycle. We want to kind of let them move through us before menstrual phase, because menstrual phase is when we kind of die, right? And we don't want to carry these stagnant emotions into the next follicular phase, right? Because then they're going to inform everything we do then. So your your luteal phase is like purge, get rid of what's not serving you. This is like the Kali goddess kind of energy. It's like tying up loose ends. You either want to finish what you still have left to finish. Anything that's unfinished, you're going to be primed for finishing tasks. Um, some people have a resistance to finishing tasks because then they have to confront their fears of failure. And so a lot of people, their shadow is like they start taking on a bunch of new tasks right before their menstrual phase. So just if that happens, just notice it. You can honor it a little bit, but for the most part, you're going to be primed to finish stuff. This is when a lot of women they start like nesting. They're getting ready to die, so they start cleaning more compulsively. They start asking their partner to like do more around the house because she's getting ready to nest. So she needs a lot more help, especially if a bunch of stuff didn't get done during the first 2 weeks. She's going to want more support during that time. This is a time when she's going to start being a lot more selfish, what we perceive as selfish. This is when she realizes that a bunch of stuff didn't get done. She's going to have to become a lot more protective of her time and energy because she's going to have her period soon. So she's got to get that stuff done now, right? Before she dies. Kind of symbolically, this is what's happening. There's an urgency to finish before death. So this is like get your last Instagram posts out before you're on your period so that you don't have to post while you're on your period. I'm feeling this urgency right now, actually. I'm moving into my luteal phase and I just hired a VA and I'm like, oh crap, I need to train her so that I don't have to work when I'm on my period. Our 6-month group program, we are taking a week off around our period. So that means that we have to prepare in advance during ovulation and finish up with planning finish up automating things during the luteal phase. If you have stagnant emotions, some part of you does not want to carry them into the next cycle. So this is when they're going to surface rage, grief, fear, uh, joy. Even if you've harvested a lot from the fruits of your labor, a lot of joy. This is a lot of women hate that we call it PMS, premenstrual syndrome, and as if it's something like wrong with you. This is a time when you're going to feel more. You're going to
So
feel so much. And you're either
I
going
want
to
to,
resist it
yeah,
and see yourself as, which is the more you resist your big emotions, the more bitchy you become because there's really not a lot of safe spaces to purge and rage and break shit and scream and yell. There's not a lot of these spaces. So women just feel cooped up in their own bodies with these impulses just running wild. And so they sneak through in these like tiny noodles of criticism. Like there's a tiny little gateway for her anger to come out, and it gets targeted at someone rather than just like released into a vacuum, as Osho would say, just dumped into the ether.
Which reminds me of, it's funny because in December, we were kind of like, oh, November, I think it was, we were like in the luteal phase of the year. Like, okay, things are like coming to an end. Natalie and I were both in our luteal phase, and we were messaging and we were like, we just want to like break things, like tear them down. Just like, it's so natural to just have this, like, just want to like get rid of everything. So I've noticed like sometimes I'm like, I just need space in my house. Like we're getting rid of those things. I, do you have any clothes that we can take to the like donation thing? Like we just need to get rid of things. And sometimes like you might want to like tear all of your projects down and all of these things. It's so natural. So it's like, can we take a really conscious way of taking that impulse and moving it into something that you might want to tear your relationship down? Can we take that impulse and move it into something that is creative and artistic, and then cultivate, like bring in some more information, cultivate a real understanding? And maybe if you still want to tear that specific thing down after your period, like when we're in the follicular phase, maybe, maybe not always, maybe it makes sense to do so. But this is generally the time where I begin to say like, let's not make big life decisions.
Yeah.
Because and I thought it was really interesting. I was reading a study a couple of weeks ago on PMS, and it was looking at the different levels of PMS that they have in different countries. And I think it was and I'm going to get this wrong. But we're going to go with it.
We're going to forgive Sheridan in advance.
I've got the country wrong, but it was in, there were a couple of different countries, such as like the United Arab Emirates, Sri Lanka, and I think France, that had the lower amount of women experiencing what they would call PMS, because just built into their culture, they have more rest and more cycles, and it's just a part of their culture. So they don't actually identify as having PMS. They just say, yeah, I'm about to bleed, so I'm just going to do things differently.
Yeah. So true. Try not to make big life decisions during your luteal phase, because the energy is going to be naturally primed to tear things down. I remember that November, I had a painting, that like a really dark painting, because I was going through some difficulties, and I painted this beautiful thing that was just so dark and demonic, and I didn't finish it, but I felt the urge to burn it. And it was like these 10 hours of art that I had painstakingly created. And I literally went to a bonfire and just let it burn. And it was just like, And I spent a lot of time shredding paper. This was right before the new year, and 2021 was a tough, beautiful year. And I just wanted to end it all. And so I remember spending a lot of time shredding and crying and dancing. Right now in my closet, I have a big box of books, and there's definitely it's been nagging at me. It's like, go donate that stuff, Natalie, go donate it. That's my urge to finish a task, to tie up loose ends. You might notice that if you have unresolved issues in your relationship, this is going to be when you want to address them. There's nothing wrong with that. Just be aware that your emotions are going to be probably running the show, which is fine. You can actually turn it into art if you're doing it consciously. It could be the biggest gift to your partner if you do it in a way that is artful and thoughtful. It doesn't have to be this like sharp, angry energy. It could just be like stomping your foot and cranking up the music and pounding the floor, and your partner's just going to be like, what is she doing? Better not bother her.
It's funny, you went to better not bother her, and I went to, isn't she beautiful?
Yeah, they're both true.
Yeah.
Both true. She's gorgeous. Better not piss her off. I'm going to do the dishes in the kitchen while she screams.
A retreat.
Yeah, okay. You do you, honey. Yeah. If you are in partnership with a woman, this is going to be so counterintuitive to you, especially since I think men are and women, but we're collectively as a human species, we're very afraid of big outbursts. We're afraid of big emotions, not because emotions are necessarily scary, but because if you have repressed emotions and you see someone expressing their emotions, it's going to bring up your own. So if your woman is raging, not even at you, or if she's crying, or if she's scared, notice if you, as the partner, have the impulse to logic it away, because that's going to make her even more intense around sharing her truth because it needs to be seen. If you are a partner who is, and your partner is having a big emotion work through, and your impulse is to somehow shut it down or say, it's okay, don't cry. Here, logically, it's going to be fine. Notice if you're doing that so that you can avoid your own big emotions that come up when you witness someone else's big emotions. The most beautiful thing that you can do for someone who is crying or angry is actually to, and this is going to scare a lot of people, encourage them to share it more. So if she's crying, show me just how sad you are. If she's angry, let me see more of your anger. I want to see it, right? And surprisingly, when you do that, she's actually going to relax. Be like, oh, there's enough space here for my big feelings. Which it goes so counterintuitive, and that doesn't mean take it if she's abusive, but to encourage them to feel more is what's going to allow her to move through that. And if you are the woman who has a big emotion and you have a partner who's scared of your emotions, be gentle with them. They've been conditioned to fear their own big emotions, and so yours activate them. So if you're in that emotional place and your partner is responding logically to you, you have the self-compassion to hold your own emotion, and you have the compassion for the person that feels like they need to control it. And it might be worth reminding them, hey, my anger is safe. You don't need to fear it. I'm not going to attack you. I'm angry. I'm not broken. Are you willing to just witness me and sit here beside me while I scream or while I punch this pillow? You know, remind your partner what you would like them to do rather than, if you don't know what you need to feel comforted, figure it out. And you use your clarity from your ovulation phase, any leftover clarity that you have from your follicular phase, to communicate to your partner how they can respond to your big emotions that are moving through you during this luteal phase. So that's all that I have to say about that, unless you have anything else.
It's beautiful. And of course, like give them permission to not want to do that. Make it safe for them to say, hey, I can't do that.
Yes.
That you when we are a safe person that to say no to, it's also giving permission to everyone to feel safe in their relationship. And counterintuitively, what will happen is when they say no to you about something, sometimes what happens is later on we need it, we want it, and they actually feel safe to provide it because they've said, or provide it maybe in a different way, maybe in the exact way that you want it, but it's this funny thing when we accept and just love, no, okay, that's okay, maybe later on they'll be like, okay, cool, let's do that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is why I believe that boundaries are such a gift to the people that you give them to, because I always say that your yes is only as meaningful as your no. Which means if you never say no, your yes is full of no's and it's felt. So
Mm.
if you are, it's just that you if you never say no, um, and then this goes to your luteal phase too, is knowing, how to set your own boundaries. And therefore, when you feel safe setting boundaries, you feel safe when other people set boundaries too. When you're saying yes, but you secretly mean no because you're afraid to set a boundary, and then you're mad at the other person for not respecting a boundary that you didn't even set, right? It really does everybody a disservice. And if you make it safe for your partner to say no to you, it will mean that much more to you when they do say yes, because you're going to
Yeah.
know that it's a full yes. Um, and that is very powerful. So consider that your no informs your future yes. That will be so much more meaningful. So, um, yeah, play with that
Mm.
one. Yummy, yummy. Good. Let's move into the menstrual phase, which is actually day one. But the reason we started
Yes.
with the follicular phase today because the follicular phase generally is about newness, and so we started it with the follicular phase. But the menstrual phase technically is actually considered to be day one, and menstruation is winter time. It's about death. Yeah.
I you okay.
Yeah, go for it.
I'll explain.
Yeah. I just
Yeah.
I can talk nonstop, so sometimes I have to.
Okay. Death. So, menstruation. Yeah. So sometimes you might notice that this actually does fall around the new moon. That will be different for each person, but symbolically, this is the new moon. This is like winter. This is
Darkness.
really a time. Yeah, it's darkness. It's really time to like go in. We're talking about coming we're talking about slowing down. So using your power of setting boundaries to slow down, say no to things, maybe spend some more time. It's really a time, as Natalie said before, where you might find that your intuition is heightened. This doesn't mean that you're that we're going to be like confusing intuition for something else. There's another podcast on how to know if it's your intuition or fear talking. Keep that in mind. But when you have a really good understanding of your intuition, you might find that at this time intuition is heightened. um, I think it's very much like more passive, like more receptive. It's all about like receiving. I find it's really wonderful just for myself. Like I make a meal earlier in the month, and at this time I'm not cooking because it's more about like you're not doing so many things. You're just like receiving. It's literally like letting go. So we're thinking like we're menstruating, right? There's a even if you're not actually bleeding and you're finding that you're still going through these cycles, for some reason you don't have so much like menstruation, there's a releasing. So once again, we're releasing the old emotions. Maybe we're releasing outdated beliefs. This is a beautiful time to do some inner work, do some journaling,
Inner
reflect a
child.
little bit more. Yeah, inner child stuff, like really going deep and releasing. um, it's a time where you might find yourself more inclined to connect to maybe the spiritual side of yourself or like nature, right? So
Mhm.
going and being in nature and just practicing being and being present. And sometimes that means that you just sit and look at things. Just
Yes.
sit, just like lay down, just like nothing, like no music, just like sit, just find some space to sit, because that's what this is. It's just being,
It's like
which can be
being.
hard. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
just
It's
being.
really interesting because, so many women, including myself, we get terrible menstrual cramps. And I've been having them ever since I was 12. And my go to was right away taking ibuprofen or naproxen, which is like Aleve and stuff like that, acetaminophen, things like this. Um, because that's all my family knew. There was like, yeah, we get that. The lineage of my women are like, yep, we get migraines, we get headaches, we get horrible cramps. Like it's just, it sucks being a woman and you
Yeah.
have to take these pills and that way you can function in society. Sorry. And I just kind of accepted that blindly. And then a few years ago, I went on a Vipassana retreat. Have you heard of these, Sheridan?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
they're free. They're 10-day silent meditation retreats, and we actually in our programs we teach Vipassana as a technique. It's basically a very specific kind of body scan. Um, but 10 days in meditation for 10 hours a day. You wake up at 4, you go to bed at 10. It's like extremely intense. And I had no period cramps for the first time in my life. And I was like, what the actual fuck? Like I started my period and I was getting ready to dread like sitting in meditation with a full-blown cramp attack. And I had like a little twinge and no pain. And I was like, what is that about? Could it be that my cramps were my body's way of saying, stop fucking doing things.
Home. Sit.
And so I have noticed actually ever since then, and as soon as I became aware of that, that could possibly be symbolically what my body was trying to do, is like, it's like a punch in the gut. You have to like get into fetal position on the floor, and then you take pills, wait till it kicks in, and then you get up and resume doing your things. And it's not like I did the Vipassana and then I promptly set a bunch of boundaries in my life and stopped doing it. It's like, no, for the next 5 years, I still had to continue taking pills and doing all these things. But gradually, like the way that we've set up both FIDA and our 6-month group program, gradually, I've started to plan my life around my cycles. So that when I'm on my period, it's like I was ready for it. I didn't have to come to a screeching halt in my life to accommodate my period. It was like as soon as the luteal phase kicked in, I started setting boundaries. I started delegating more things so that I just it's like I pulled into the garage just as it started.
Yeah.
And relaxed. I set up a hot bath with some Epsom salt, and I notice sometimes as soon as I pull out my phone, I get like a little twinge in my uterus, and I'm like, oh, sorry, my dear, sorry. I just got distracted. And it's like the more I use this time to rest and just do, literally, this is a time of nothing. You know, if you look at wintertime, there's nothing happening. It's just deadness and stillness. And so many of us have this resistance to doing nothing, and it shows up as urges to do something. It shows up as an urge to check your phone. It shows up as an urge to clean up something. Ideally, you set your life up in such a way so that you can do nothing. Lay in bed all day, get Uber Eats, like, or plan ahead, plan meals ahead of time. Make sure you have Epsom salt baths available. I mean, oh my God, magnesium for your period cramps. Oh, so good. So if you have menstrual cramps, it could be, PCOS, endometriosis, all of these things. My metaphorical stance on your period cramps are telling you that you're doing too much. They don't cancel each other out. A lot of these female problems that are happening are a result of us disowning our feminine nature. So yes, get the medications. If you need the surgery, get the surgery, do the conventional medicinal things, and notice if you are working too hard and your body is just kind of trying to figure out how to stop you from doing what you should have stopped doing a long time ago. And I've noticed my cramps have significantly decreased when I started living in alignment. And that means tell your partner, I love you and I need to be alone right now. Would you be willing to make me a nice meal? Would you be willing to pick up some chocolate on the way home? This is a time to ask people to care for you. And ideally, you don't do it at the last minute when you're feeling like a bitch and you're cranky and you're desperate because you didn't plan ahead. Now, be my caretaker. It's right. Try to avoid getting to your period in a screeching halt. Let people know in advance. On next Wednesday, I'm probably going to start my period. Do you think you could have dinner ready? That would be amazing. I would love that, right? So give people a heads up in your life so that it doesn't come as a surprise every month that you need support.
And as you speak, something that's also coming to mind. So yeah, we can stand ourselves up to receive support. And I think that, if we go back, if we go all the way, and I have a really good book that I recommend everyone will read in this, but if we go back all the way, at this time period, we were usually surrounded by other women and we were all doing nothing together. So we have kind of encoded into our body this desire for one support. So if we really gone back to the tribal point, the men are taking care of the kids, right? Yeah. We've probably cooked something, or maybe we gave something to the men so that they could then bring us some cooked meat. I don't know. So we have food. We're not cooking. We're not in the kitchen. We're actually in the red tent, if we think about it. and which is a place that in many ancient tribes women would go to bleed. And there are many ways that this was looked upon. Sometimes it was in an empowering way, sometimes it was in a disempowering way. But many times women would remove themselves and be in circle together bleeding. Now, when we have this desire, this innate desire to receive support, space, and stillness, and we have a busy household, or maybe we're not receiving space and stillness. And then on top of that, we layer on to that maybe the experiences that we have had where we felt really alone, or maybe someone in our life has abandoned us, or maybe we really struggle receiving support for some reason. It doesn't feel accessible, it doesn't feel safe. It is natural. And then, we're in this and we're like doing nothing and maybe we're in pain. It's really natural to have a heightened sense of aloneness, sadness, longing, heartache. And it may be heartache that is related specifically to that month. And it also just might be like a remembrance of all of the other things that have happened to you or people in your life or your mom and her mom and all of those things. And it might also just be a longing and a heartache. If you are attuned to it, you might, and this will land differently for everyone, but maybe you're longing going back to having a circle of women where you would just feel supported with and in tune with. There's a certain sisterhood that's really beautiful when you know that other people are bleeding at the same time you are and ovulating at the same time. It's really nice. And so maybe if you don't feel that, it can be really lonely. So yeah, using all of your tools to manage all of those big emotions and that heartache that can come up.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, I remember years ago when I was just learning about these things for the first time. I have an aunt who is kind of my wise, crazy aunt, and I was telling her I was feeling very lonely overall, not just in my periods, and disconnected. And she was like, "You should start a women's circle." And I was like, "What? What's that?" And it's literally, and so I did, and I didn't have any framework. I went on Google and I was like, "How to host a women's circle?" I didn't know anything, and I remember my first women's circle was like two girlfriends that managed to come to my apartment on the new moon, and we just like journaled together, and we like burned some incense, and we talked about some of the stuff that was going on in our lives, and we just kind of boosted each other up. And we did that every month, sometimes twice a month, once on the new moon, once on the full moon. We did that for like 3 months, but and it's not like it stayed, but the closeness that resulted from that was unbelievable. And it didn't matter who showed up. I hosted more women's circles like that, and sometimes there were 20 people, and sometimes there were two. And even women that I didn't know, we would find a shared connection, just through ritual, through coming together at certain times of the month, through sharing your stories that you realize are actually so common. Like it's universal to sometimes just want to connect and touch women. And we would do things like trust falls, where you open your arms wide and you fall back and your sisters catch you. Like this is a time of deep feminine ritual, and it can be so sacred. And actually, if we're going to talk about the tribal days, you mentioned that there's an empowering way of looking at it and a disempowering way. I would say the disempowering way is where we see all the crazy women get together and they do witchy things that are with dark magic and dark energy. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it, and it had been looked at this way, is the men would like go out of their way to make sure that the women were comfortable, because some of the most creative ideas, because when women went into the red tent and they connected to source, to the moon or to whatever, or they howled at the moon, they got, it's like through their bleed, they got this like portal into the divine. Through, you literally bleed into the earth, and the earth receives what you no longer need, and it gets kind of recycled into this big cosmic magnificence. And so you are an open portal for the divine to work its way through you. And the men knew this. And so if they were struggling with an invention or something, or they had another tribe that they were worried about, or they were trying to figure out how to solve this problem with the crops, the women would go into the red tent, and this is when the answers would come to them from source, from intuition, right? So the men knew that and tried to make sure that their women were as supported as possible, because they knew that the women were connected to magic, and that magic was going to happen during that time if they were properly supported. I mean, imagine that's how we treated our women today, knowing that women are these magical creatures that have a lot to give when we allow them to connect to themselves. And so I want you guys to, as you're listening to this, male or female, recognize just how important it is to honor this particular time in your cycle. I know it's, for some of you guys, you get horrible cramps, you get migraines and all that stuff. Just don't overhaul your entire, or maybe do, maybe overhaul your entire life and say, okay, boss, I'm going to be taking my first 2 days of my period off from now on. How are we going to factor in 2 more sick days? Like, maybe you do that, or maybe you set an intention to just hold that vision in your mind of what kind of menstrual phase you would like to have. What kind of boundaries can you set so that this time is a bit more sacred and enjoyable to you? It doesn't have to be an inconvenience to your life. It's not an inconvenience. It's perfectly, like, not even designed. It's like programmed into you. You have literally a programmed phase of brilliance every single month. Why would you think that's an inconvenience? It's brilliant design. Yeah. Are you muted?
I was probably just speaking softly. I said it is, and I just couldn't have said that better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah. And if you don't feel like being around your partner the second half of your cycle, you're a woman. you're human. And it doesn't mean you love your partner any less. In fact, I actually had a client a couple weeks ago, and she's saying that every time she spends time away from her partner, she enjoys it and she feels guilty about the fact that she enjoys it. And my response was, you're afraid that if you enjoy it too much, will you even want to be with your partner anymore? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, this is like old programming from multiple accounts that, number one, your partner should complete you. Therefore, when you're not with them, you should be miserable. And it also comes from programming that women are here to just endlessly serve other people. Those two things. And I want you to consider how marvelous it could be for you to be happy with or without your partner. That seems scary, but isn't that how you would want it to be? Wouldn't you want to be happy alone or with your partner? You being happy without your partner is not a flaw. That's a gift. That's actually the highest form of love, is when you are happy alone and with others, because then you know that when you are with them, you are giving from overflow. So if you are wanting to be away from your partner, that doesn't take anything away. And actually, the more comfortable you are with that fact, the more safe your partner is going to feel too. Press and I have this inside joke all the time. It's like, I love you and please leave. Okay, I see you for dinner. So make it playful, make it fun, have an underlying culture of trust that I can be away from you and still love you. They don't cancel each other out. Yeah,
and it makes that time together just so much more. And if we go into the energetics as well, that makes you a safer person to say no to, because suddenly your other partner doesn't feel like, oh my God, it's my responsibility to keep this person happy.
Right.
Oh God, what a responsibility to keep someone else happy. And we all experience that at different stages in our life, and probably you experience it, maybe they experience as well. Maybe you flop back towards each other in a way that's really natural. But when we can both just be like, okay, and allow it. I know, for, just speaking from personal experience, there's this little part of me that has felt scared for my partner to be happy without me because, like, oh, then why will they stay with me?
Right.
Does that mean I'm a bad girlfriend? Like, what does that
Right.
mean
They
about
should
our
be,
relationship?
you're confusing love with
Mm,
addiction. If they're not addicted to me, then they don't love me. Addiction is not love.
yeah. And we have that so much. And so we have to, that's when we go back and we kind of like do the inner work to reprogram all of that stuff and get and change
We
that
learned
around.
that. And
Yeah.
if for many of you that may have been the message you learned from movies, or maybe that someone in your household when you were growing up had this addictive, it could be
All the
addictive
time.
love, it could be addictive controlling, like love is addiction. I depend on you. And there is a healthy level of interdependency, of course, but it's chosen. It's not coming from this like forceful controlling energy. It comes from, there is a consent that comes around interdependency that is much healthier, that like controlling and relational addiction does not.
Mm. Yeah. And there's like a safety behind it. Like, okay,
Yeah.
we are interdependent and also we don't have to be, and we will still both be
Right.
okay.
And we
Like
have
we,
both chosen into this dynamic as opposed
yeah,
to getting bulldozed into it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Amazing.
totally. I do want to say there is the book that I mentioned which totally transformed my understanding of like the menstrual phase. It's called The Red 10. It's a fictional book and it's based in the days of actually I think Jesus. It's by Anita Diamant, and it's such a beautiful way to like connect with the the way that the menstrual period was seen for women by women in tribes. And I've noticed that when I listened to that book, I got on Audible, I just started like, it kind of like penetrates your subconscious. And then, when you find yourself bleeding, you can kind of be like, oh, I can look at that differently now. That's nice.
Yes, yes. I look forward to my periods now, which is something I never thought I would say. I always saw it as an
Yeah.
inconvenience, and now it's like I can't wait to just soak in the bath for 2 days and
Yeah.
just sit there. And it's not even like doing the meditating. It's like you said earlier in this session. It's just sitting there and like, oh, Sheridan has a brilliant quote that I say to all my clients, which is to practice feeling and noticing more of what else is there. So this is your time to do that. Just yum.
Yeah.
Oh, this has been so good. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah. And if you are a woman, either in relationship with a man, a woman, or someone else, if you are a woman in partnership, um, you can still join Both Feet In. We had our first lecture yesterday, and this program remains open. So if you are still interested in joining, you can catch up on a few of the sessions, and we would still love to have you. Please just head on over to anxiouslovecoach.com, and you can find Both Feet In right on our website. So we would love to have you. Sheridan does more the inner work rituals, the meditation sessions. She guides a lot of the practices. My sessions are more about the intellectual component and answering the questions, the more coaching based stuff. Sheridan's all in the feels. So it's the good stuff. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I know this is a bit of a longer episode than we've done before, but I think this is one of my favorites that we've ever done. It's always that way when you come on.
We always say that it's just going to keep gradually getting better.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, thanks, Sharon. I so appreciate you being on here. You are so brilliant. And thank you all for listening today.
Bye.
Bye.